Hi everyone, I'm Babinka Bear, your local sun bear, art history teacher, and educational streamer over on Twitch. So today's class is actually an edited down version of a longer stream where the chat and I analyzed the Olympus XII, a group of Greco-Roman inspired Digimon, and compared them with their mythological counterparts. If you enjoy this kind of educational content, feel free to use the comment section below to add to the conversation or just make note of anything that I missed. And by the way, this is only part 1, with part 2 still in the process of being edited, but I've also been thinking about continuing this trend by talking about other Digimon that are inspired by folklore from different parts of the world. So like ancient Egypt or even Mesoamerica. So let me know if that's something you're interested in, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this video. But okay, let's go. So, we're here, we're doing our educational stream. This is going to be a two-parter because there's just going to be a lot, but basically today's topic is all about Greco-Roman deities. So that's gods and goddesses from Greece and Rome, because there's a lot of overlap there, but I will talk about how they're not exactly the same. But that's also overlapping with Digimon. So if you guys have been tuning into my streams lately, you know that I'm back in my Digimon era, you know? Arguably I've never left, but it's like magnified 100-fold after Digimon Con a couple of months now or weeks or however long it's been. I'm very much back in my Digimon era, and I wanted to combine two things that I really like, which is Digimon and my love for researching historical and cultural things. So what better way to do that than to combine Greek and Roman deities with something called the Olympus XII. So the Olympus XII, they're actually a group of basically they're Digimon, but they are analogs, or they are basically like Digimon versions of the Olympians. These are like Greek gods, right? So that's kind of the focus for today, and one of the reasons why I wanted to focus on it is because there's this Digimon game coming out called Time Stranger, Digimon Story Time Stranger. So that one seems like it's gonna focus heavily on the Olympus XII. And I've always been the kind of person growing up that when I watched Disney's Hercules, I enjoyed it, but around middle school when I started to get into Greek mythology, I was that one kid that was like, actually Disney's Hercules isn't accurate to the actual mythology. It's different because actually so I was definitely that kid. And I see that I'm not alone, because I would see on YouTube that there's a lot of people that also made similar videos, similar content on how oh, this doesn't match up with the mythology, blah blah blah. And we're gonna encounter that a lot, especially in kind of the part 2 that's gonna be happening on Friday. But part of this is also just to appreciate how much the all the creative liberties and all the creative ways that the creators of these Digimon, the people who designed them, took this theme of the Greek gods and kind of turn it into something unique. So it's gonna be less of a actually it's wrong. It's gonna be less of that and more of oh, it's pretty cool how they interpreted this, because this isn't the first time that the Greek and Roman gods have been interpreted in any kind of media, right? You see it all the time with Percy Jackson, Shin Megami Tensei, I was just talking about Disney's Hercules, so it's gonna be kind of an exploration of that. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. This is gonna be part 1, by the way. I've named it something cool. I've named it the Children of Saturn, because we're gonna be focusing on a couple of deities that are the children of a god named Saturn. Part 2 is going to be called the Children of Jupiter, which, you know, is very the same, but it's basically we're going to be dealing with 2 generations of deities here. So, and their analogs, or their equivalents, or their versions in Digimon. So let's go from there. Before we start, a little bit about just mythology in general, but especially Greek and Roman mythology. I grew up learning Greek and Roman mythology through a book that it's called Daulaire's Greek Myths, and it kind of made the mythology very PG-13. But I guess what I'm trying to say with this is that it's easy to learn about mythology and think that there is just one canon to it. There's one version of the story, but in actuality, that's almost never the case. With mythology, it's the sources that we're using is actually a codified or written down version of a bunch of oral stories. So if we go all the way, if we get like really nitpicky and go deep into like the origin of just mythology, like people since the dawn of time were trying to figure out the world around them, right? And then they would start to kind of theory craft in a way how the world came to be, and they would start to name concepts in their life. Like for example, like in Egypt, they really valued the Nile River, so that Nile River first became like a special force, right? And eventually over the course of like various stories and millennia and generations, it became like its own deity, its own god, right? So it's kind of the same thing here. So you take something that is very important in a culture, such as war, love, leadership, you tell stories about those concepts, you personify them, and boom, you end up with gods and goddesses, basically. So over time, these stories would get told just orally, right, around the campfire, and these stories would change over time with whoever told the story, and, you know, whichever generation the story was being told to, right? So after that, someone finally codified them, which is just a fancy way of saying, like, someone finally wrote it down, right? And we assume that these are the canon. We assume that this is, like, the one story, but actually, like I said, even that is going to change over time. There's going to be multiple retellings, and there's going to be multiple versions of the same story. So I say all this because you might have learned the mythology a little bit differently. Like, I'm going to say like, oh, in this myth, Athena does this and Poseidon does that. You might have learned it a different way. That doesn't mean either of us are necessarily wrong. It's just two different versions of a similar story. I mean, Christianity does have a canon book, and look how many interpretations there are. That too, but also people don't always even agree on which books are part of the Bible, right? So like if you go to, for example, like the Christian churches in Ethiopia, they're gonna include something called the Book of Enoch, which isn't included in other versions of the Christian Bible. So, you know, there's different texts within Judaism, there's different texts within Islam, there's different texts within Christianity. They all worship the same God, but even within Christianity itself, there's different books that are considered canon, right? There's like the Apocrypha, there's the Gnostic text, there's like the Book of Enoch, which some sects of SECTS, not the other one, some of them might recognize them as canon, but some might not, right? It's the same with Greek and Roman religious stories. And then Testosterdile said, love this disclaimer, always appreciate the ones who write them down, but it's impossible to truly canonize oral storytelling. Exactly, because it changes with every storyteller, and even like that like earliest version of the story might unfortunately be lost to time, right? So we're just doing the best with what we got. It always fascinates me when people try to kind of reconstruct what the earliest mythologies, stories, and folklore might have been, or even the earliest deities. For example, if there's people who have like reconstructed Indo-European language, right? Like the mother tongue of which like the Romance languages and the Germanic languages and even like the languages from India like came from, right? And from that, they also tried to reconstruct like the earliest deities, right? Like the Sky Father, the Earth Mother, that kind of stuff, which we'll kind of touch on too with all this. So but yeah, that's basically what this slide is saying, is that like the details might vary wildly, especially even within like Greek culture and Roman culture. It's gonna vary according to time period, according to region. Someone who's like the supreme deity of one part of like the Roman Empire or one part of Greece might not be as important in like another part, right? So and I'll try to go over the different variations when I can, but you know, there's already a lot of stuff to cover, so it's not going to be exhaustive. So I hope you will forgive me for that. And then lastly, I do want to put in a content warning, especially for those who have never I guess experienced Greek and Roman mythology before, is that there are going to be mentions of sexual assault, incest, and violence. And violence is very much an umbrella term because there's going to be different kinds of violence. But if that kind of stuff, you know, can be potentially triggering, this might be the stream to sit out, which I would much rather that you stay safe than stay behind and particularly, and like, you know, unexpectedly get affected, right? So I totally understand. But yeah, with that, I hope that's a good enough disclaimer, good enough warning. Let's go ahead and get into it, shall we? So Greek and Roman deities. Another thing to really kind of note with these two is that it's, especially for people that have like studied Greek mythology, and then go into like Roman mythology, it's very easy to think that like the Romans just copied the Greeks. For example, if you think of the planets in the sky, there's like Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, and these are actually Roman names of Greek deities, right? So Mercury is Hermes, Venus is Aphrodite, Jupiter is Zeus, and all of that, right? In many ways, the Romans did kind of, I've seen people use the word appropriate. Like, in many ways, they did kind of appropriate like Greek religion into their own, but in many ways they kind of made it their own. How do I say this? One theory of how Roman religion even started before they even interacted with the Greeks is that they mostly just like worshipped or valued nature spirits or certain ideas, like I said, warfare, leadership, fatherhood, patriarchy, all of that kind of stuff. And then when they met the Greeks, it's like, ooh, we like these stories. Why don't we apply it to some of the gods we already had in place? So they kind of did copy, but not exactly, because they also saw gods differently according to their own culture. I put here that many Roman deities were syncretized. Syncretized is just a fancy way of saying that they combined those gods together. But they weren't always necessarily the same. And the main example I like to talk about is Ares versus Mars. So Ares was the Greek god of war, but not. They actually have multiple gods of war, the other one being Athena, but Athena was like the warrior goddess of like strategy. She's the big brain of warfare. She's like, all right, we're gonna plan out this war, we're gonna plan out this warfare, right? That was not Ares. Ares was the god of just like unga bunga, I'm gonna go in with my spear and sword and just kill, you know, ultra violence and blood and guts and stuff, all that good stuff. And because of this, the Greeks interpreted Ares to be kind of an idiot. Exactly, the god of the rushdown. So they saw him as like brutal, like unnecessarily brutal, and they saw him as an idiot. He was, in a lot of mythology, he's usually like humiliated, right? Because that's how they saw war. They saw war as like unnecessary. And I say they, but once again, this is a generalization. There might have been like Sparta, for example, like there might have been other parts of Greece that thought he was an okay guy, but a lot of different cultures within Greece, they saw him as foolish and brutal because that's how they saw war. Meanwhile, the equivalent in Rome is Mars. And instead of being seen as this like big idiot that like got himself into trouble all the time, he was this dignified symbol of like the Roman Empire marching in and like conquering other nations, right? Other cultures. Because they saw war as glory, like glorified. They saw it as dignified. That's how you would like show that you've become a man or that you become like a person, by being a warrior, right? So like Greece and Rome, they saw war in different ways, and thus they saw the gods in different ways. So I kind of just wanted to put that in because, like I said, it's very easy to be like, oh yeah, Zeus, Jupiter, same guy, same hat, right? Sometimes, but not always. The only example that I can think of off the top of my head is Ares and Mars, but we might go into some other examples as well. So that's a little bit of an intro to Greek and Roman mythology. Let's talk about Digimon. Let's talk about Digimon. So some of you might already be familiar with Digimon, especially if you are like me and you grew up with it, right? So this might be completely unnecessary, but there might be folks that are either younger or they just completely like didn't watch it for certain reasons. I've heard of people my generation that didn't watch Digimon because they saw it as like a copy of Pokemon, and that always gets me like no, they didn't copy. They didn't copy each other. You don't understand. But yeah, like there might be people that don't know about it. So let's go into it. So what is Digimon? So yeah, Digimon is a combination of the word digital monster, kind of like how Pokemon is pocket monster, so Digimon. But a lot of people, especially in my generation would have thought that it's a copy of Pokemon. Actually, they were developed around the same exact time. and almost completely by coincidence, Digital World. It was actually, Digimon was actually developed to be Tamagotchi for boys. So it was marketed as, like, if you can see here in like the top, what is this, left corner? These are V-pets, virtual pets, and they were kind of made to be Tamagotchi but for boys because they could fight each other. And boys love fighting. They don't want to be like girls and nurturing an egg. Like, they want to fight. They want to raise a monster, but so it can fight. So it's for boys, you see. Which obviously it's extended past that, but yeah, this would eventually develop into different anime, manga, video games, TCG, which I'm currently obsessed with, and more, including the Digimon 1999 anime, which I'm a huge fan of. Love it. And for some information on what Digimon actually are in universe, they're digital monsters, basically. They're made out of data, and usually they live in their own digital world that's separate from the real world. And real world usually means like our world, right? Bear world, essentially. But like Pokemon, Digimon can digivolve, though the Japanese version just calls it evolve. They use the word shinka, which literally just means evolve. And they can go to different stages. However, the way that it's kind of set apart from Pokemon is that Pokemon, usually once they evolve, they're stuck like that forever. Or not stuck, but they remain in that form forever. So you evolve your Pichu into a Pikachu, it never goes back to being a Pichu. You evolve it into a Raichu, it never goes back to being a Pikachu. In Digimon, it's a little different. They can go back and forth. They can become like a stronger form, but then they can de-digivolve to be back to their like cutesy form, right? But there's also branching paths. So this was kind of a big part of like the Digimon 1999 anime, because if you like mistreated your Digimon, they could digivolve to be evil and scary, like Skullgreymon. But then it could revert back to its like cute form, and then once you raise it correctly, it becomes like the quote-unquote like correct or the more appropriate digivolution of Metal Greymon, right? But anyway, yeah, that's a short, brief intro to Digimon. Of course, there's like so much more depending on like the source material, but that's just kind of the basics of the basics. Yeah, with that, let's go ahead and get specifically into what is called the Olympus 12. So this is a group of 12 Digimon, and more actually. We're actually going to cover more than 12. This is a group of Digimon that are very much inspired by Greek and Roman mythology and religion, but with a focus on what's called the 12 Olympians in Greek, or the Deconsentes in Latin, or in Roman. So they're made up of 12 gods, but there's also a couple that are not included in here. So you have here Zeus. I'll read out their Greek names first. Wait, how should I do this? You know what? I'll go one by one. So like here we have Zeus and Jupiter. So Zeus is the Greek name, Jupiter is the Roman name. He's usually seen as the king of the gods, but also as the sky father. Then we have his consort, his wife Hera, also known as Juno. We have Zeus's brother Poseidon, also known as Neptune. Athena is... Oh, wait, I should actually read out what they do. So, Hera is the goddess of, like, marriage and family. She's the queen of the gods. Poseidon is the god of the sea, but also earthquakes. Athena is the goddess of wisdom and strategy. So she is a war battle goddess, but with more emphasis on the strategy part of it. Also known as Minerva. We have Ares, also known as Mars. We just talked about him. He's the god of warfare, but also the violent part of war. Aphrodite and Venus, they are the goddess of love and passion, especially erotic love. We have Apollo, who is one of the few gods that doesn't actually have a Roman name. The Romans would also just call him Apollo. And he is one of the many sun gods that you see in Greek tradition, as well as the god of poetry and music. And then we have his twin sister, Artemis, also known as Diana, who is the goddess of the moon and of hunting. We have Hephaestus, who is the god of the forge and of fire and volcanoes. He's also known as Vulcan. And we also have Dionysus, who is also known by Bacchus, but a lot of people think that Bacchus is his Roman name. Bacchus is actually just another Greek name. It's actually just another Greek name, but the Romans did adopt that name eventually. Then you have Hermes, also known as Mercury. He is the god of many things. to me, he presides over the most interesting topics, but it's stuff like travel, merchants, crossroads, thieves, foreigners. like he's I don't know, he does a lot. He does a lot. And then we have Demeter, also known as Ceres, who is the goddess of agriculture and fertility. There's also a couple others, such as Hestia, also known as Vesta. She's the goddess of the hearth. And then, of course, Pluto, also known as Hades, who is the god of the underworld. So we're gonna go into that as well. Here's a little bit of it's a very abbreviated family tree. Well, it's not super abbreviated, but I am going to tell you a couple of stories before we like go even more specific into the main deities. So actually, yeah, I'll go over this. So this is kind of like, according to a source called Hesiod's Theogony, which is kind of an attempt to take all of this oral tradition and like write it down. He kind of was the first guy to do how do I say this? It's kind of like, so this guy Neil Gaiman, this author Neil Gaiman, a controversial figure right now, I know, but he did this really cool thing where he made he wrote a book called American Gods, and in it he kind of wrote the story as if all of the different mythologies, religions of the world they're all true. They all share this world together. So, you know, the Greek gods share this world with the Egyptian gods, with the Mesoamerican gods, and all of that. So he tried to combine all the different mythologies together and say, you know what? Everyone's right. Everyone's correct. So Hesiod actually did something like... Oh, Schnackery's here. My cat Schnackery. Hesiod did something very similar. He tried to combine the different mythologies, the different oral traditions around Greece, around all of the different islands of Greece, and tried to say, you know what? They're all correct. They're all right. And this is how I'm gonna try and like say that they are all correct. So he tried to combine all the different like stories together. But in that, he goes over like the beginning of the world and the different like gods that rose out of that. So I'm gonna give you a very abbreviated version of that story. So according to Hesiod's Theogony, in the beginning, there was just a void, right? And suddenly the void spat out Gaia, alongside a couple of other figures as well. But we're just gonna focus on Gaia. Gaia is the earth, and she's also known as Terra. Terra ended up begetting or creating Ouranos, also known as Caelus, the sky. And even though they are mother and child, they eventually procreated. This is what I meant about the whole incest thing. It actually gets worse, but yeah, they ended up procreating together. They made a whole bunch of different children together, including a bunch of Cyclops, including these figures called the Hecatoncheires, who have like 50 heads and 50 hands or 100 hands, something like that. But they also made a group called the Titans. Now, the Titans were kind of like the first gods, the first like deities, and each of them represented a different idea, like the ocean or the harvest and stuff like that. So one of them in particular was Kronos. He was the god of harvest. He also ended up getting combined with the deity of time, Kronos, like spelled differently. But usually they are kind of like combined together to become the god of harvest and time. He's known as Saturn, which is why this section is called the Children of Saturn, because the gods we're going to go over are the children of this god, Cronus, Saturn. So he took with him a wife, Rhea, who was also his sister, once again, whole incest thing. So he took his sister Rhea as a wife, but oh yeah, okay, so before I get too far ahead of myself, the Titans decided that they didn't want Ouranos to rule over the world or to rule over them anymore. So they actually overthrew Ouranos. There's a whole bunch of reasons why they didn't want Ouranos to like rule over anymore. One of them is that he imprisoned the Titans like brothers, the Cyclops and the Hecatoncheires. But just know that the Titans wanted to overthrow Ouranos, and they did. And the part that I swear to God is important is Kronos, he took a sickle, you know, the sickle that you use to cut like grain and stuff. He took that and he castrated Ouranos. He cut off his testicles. He cut it off, and the testicles, the testes, they landed in the ocean. This is going to be important later on. I promise you. I promise you that I'm not just saying this to say this. After he overthrew his father, his mother, Gaia, said, oh, you watch out now. You watch out, because as you overthrew your father, one of your children is gonna overthrow you. Okay, so Cronus hears this. He's like, oh no. He's like, you know what? I'm gonna big brain it. Instead of having one of my kids overthrow me, I'm just gonna eat them. And it's not like you don't want to, like, I don't know, have them grow up somewhere else, or like just use contraception or something like that. And Cronus is just like, nope, just gonna eat them. So Rhea gives birth to their first child, Hestia, and she is consumed. She's eaten, and then gives birth to Hera, Demeter, Hades, and Poseidon. They're all eaten up by Kronos as soon as they're born. So of course Rhea isn't taking this well, so she's like, you know what, with this last child that I'm gonna give birth to, I'm gonna do a little hee hee ha ha. I'm gonna spirit away little Zeus, as I'm gonna name him, and I'm gonna get him to be raised by nymphs and a goat, which will be important later on. And in return, she gives Kronos a rock. She says like, oh look, it's our little baby boy Zeus, here you go, eat up. Kronos eats the rock. Zeus grows up on another island. He's raised by a bunch of nymphs and a she-goat named Amalthea. He grows up, and eventually he is old enough to know that he has to take revenge for his siblings and for his uncles that are still imprisoned, the Hecatonchires and the Cyclops. So he actually frees the Cyclops, the Hecatonchires. They actually give him a bunch of weapons. And then Zeus, alongside another titaness named Metis, they actually fool Kronos into vomiting. They give him a potion and he vomits up not only the stone, but all 5 of his siblings in reverse order. So for example, Hestia was the firstborn, but she was the last to come out out of the vomit. so she is both the firstborn and the lastborn. So they all come out and they actually fight against the Titans in a war called the Titanomachy. So this is going to be important in terms of like another Digimon that we're going to see that is a representation of the Titans, essentially. So they fight this war. The Olympians, as they are now called, they win against the Titans, and Zeus becomes the king of the gods. So that pretty much sets up the rest of Greek mythology. So aren't the Cyclops Poseidon's kids? There might be a different version of the Cyclops, but the Cyclops are pretty squarely Gaia's children, because they're one of the ones that are imprisoned in this place called Tartarus, alongside the Hecatonchires. Exactly. So that kind of like sets up the story of like what's going on with like this first generation, who I'm gonna be calling the children of Saturn. But okay, let's go ahead and go into how this relates to Digimon. So the Olympus XII, as they're known, they're actually from a different digital world. Now, if this is your first introduction to Digimon, you're like, wait, there's another digital world? So if you watch Digimon growing up, that takes place in a digital or one of the many worlds. That takes place in one digital world. There's actually another one called Iliad. And that is actually named after an epic poem by a guy named Homer. So yeah, digital world Iliad is a completely different digital world. You want to imagine that it's like being on a different server, right? It's actually pretty cool to be able to talk about servers nowadays, because I'm referring to a computer server, but you can also kind of imagine it as like a Discord server, right? If the entire digital world is in one server, you want to imagine Iliad being its own separate server. So yeah, the Olympus XII are from this world, from this server called Iliad, and the main computer of that world is called Homeros, which is a reference to Homer. Not Simpson, but the poet that made the Iliad, which like I said is an epic poem that is all about this event called the Trojan War. And then according to I forgot if this is like I forgot what kind of game it is, but one of the games is called Digimon Crusader. And according to the storyline of this one, Homeros, the main computer, the home computer, intended for Digimon to live according to free will, even if it meant anarchy, right? The Olympus XII, however, this group of gods, they wanted to go against this, and they wanted to teach the Digimon good and evil, basically. They wanted them to I guess, have a conscience. Homeros didn't like this, so he punished, or it punished, the Olympus XII by giving power to another Digimon called Plutomon and the Titans. This digital world is going to be heavily featured in the next Digimon game called Time Stranger, so that's kind of why I bring it up here. So yeah, it's a little complicated, but basically, like, it's almost like, if I can think of like what I mean by like, oh, Homeros wanted the Digimon to live according to free will, and the Olympus XII did not. It's basically like, imagine that you're walking down a road and you see a coyote eating a squirrel. Let's just say that, right? Do you intervene, right? Like, do you intervene because it seems so pitiful to you, or do you just let nature take its course? Because this is saying that the Olympus XII it's basically saying that the Olympus XII, they decided to save the squirrel. They decided to save the little creature, even though that means now the coyote doesn't eat, right? Like, but you know, they tried to kind of like put their own idea of justice in place instead of just letting the natural world play out, as it were. So this is why Homeros decided to punish them by giving power to another Digimon called Plutomon and the Titan. So the first Digimon we're actually going to look at is not even one of the Olympus XII, but I think he's important to the story because he is basically a representation of the Titans from the story of the Titanomachy. Or the war against the Titans. So he was actually a little bit of behind the scenes here. Titamon was actually created by Kenji Watanabe, who, if you don't know, he's basically like one of the main designers for Digimon. Like he's kind of like the OG Digimon designer. And he actually wanted to use this design for Bacchusmon, which is basically like the equivalent of Dionysus. But eventually he kind of like trashed that concept and went with a completely different one. But this one ended up being an ultimate form for Ogremon. So if you're familiar with Digimon, you watched the 1999 series and you remember Ogremon, this is actually his ultimate form, or rather his like mega form. So he eventually turns into this. But he basically represents the Titans in this story, but not a specific one. He doesn't represent like Cronus or Saturn. He just represents the Titans. Thus his name is Titamon. There you go. Before we get into the ad break, the last thing I want to say about this cool looking Digimon is look at his sword. It's Skull Greymon. It's Skull Greymon. Isn't that cool? Testosterone. Much to think about so far about the ethics of morality and who's in charge of teaching it. Makes me wonder what made the 12 think their ideas were objective good, worth teaching. Right? I think that's why it's so compelling, a story like that. Because it's like, yeah, do you just let nature play its course? Or do you try to instill some kind of like morality? And what if your morality isn't necessarily like the objectively good one, right? Then what? So it is an interesting conundrum to have. So let's continue on, and we're actually gonna get into our very first god, which is Jupiter, or Zeus. And I also put the Roman spelling, or the Latin spelling rather. The thing is, we're literally using the Latin alphabet right now. If you can read the text on here, you can read Latin. But there's also like some changes according to the spelling, because little known fact, there actually is no J, or rather, I actually don't know about like modern Greek, but his name wouldn't have been pronounced Jupiter back in Roman times. It actually would have been Jupiter, with like a y sound. It's actually the same with his wife Juno. It wouldn't have been pronounced Juno. It would have been Juno. So yeah, this is Jupiter. Jupiter. And funnily enough, the Digimon Jupitermon, the Japanese katakana for it actually does say Jupitermon. So if you like watch an anime that has Jupitermon in it, they're not gonna be saying like Jupitermon da. They would say Jupitermon da. They would say Jupitermon. Same with Juno. Her name would be Junomon. So yeah, I included Homeric hymns here. After the stream is done, or rather after it's done on Friday, I'm gonna link this entire presentation to you guys, and you can find in the notes section, I actually have my sources as well as a Homeric hymn. Hymns were a way to kind of figure out who was the god of what and how people of that time period saw this particular god. So even though there's plenty of stories that we might know nowadays, and there's things that we might emphasize nowadays, like for example, I'm gonna tell you right now my personal bias and kind of like my way of understanding Jupiter is that he's a womanizer. He's not always seen in like the best of lights, but he was back in like Greek and Roman times, he was one of the most important gods, right? So yes, he did have this personality as like a womanizer, which also has its like own political reasons for doing that. But I just feel like these hymns are really good what's called primary sources to show you how the Greeks and Romans valued this guy. So not every slide is going to have a Homeric hymn. It is going to be in the notes section though, but I'll read out this one right now. So this is how the people in Homer's time saw Zeus. So I will sing of Zeus, chiefest among the gods and greatest, all-seeing, the lord of all, the fulfiller who whispers words of wisdom to Themis as she sits leaning towards him. I don't remember who Themis is. Be gracious, all-seeing son of Kronos, the most excellent and great. So off of that quote, off of that hymn, you can tell that the people of Homer's time really valued Jupiter, really valued Zeus, right? So each of the gods usually have some kind of hymn dedicated to them, which also talks about like how they recognize and what's called epithets. Epithets are just titles. So for example, Poseidon, who we're gonna go over shortly, is known as the Earth Shaker. So that's how we know he's also associated with earthquakes. Here's the deal with Zeus. He is the god of the sky, also god of lightning, thunder, but also justice and leadership and kingship, as he is the king of the gods. He's the youngest son of Kronos and Rhea, and he's married to Hera. He also has a couple other wives, but he is infamous for having many consorts, as in women and men, that he pursued, victims, as in assault victims, and offspring. So you're also going to be seeing this with other gods as well, such as Poseidon and Apollo. They have many like consorts. The reason why this might be the case in mythology is because you want to, or kind of like in the meta of the mythology, is that lots of, you know, kings and great heroes will probably say that they are descended from someone great, and usually they're gonna say Zeus. So it kind of makes sense for a lot of heroes to descend from Zeus. But also it could be a matter of what's called syncretism, which is combining different religions and religious ideas together. So let's say that in one part of Greece, they have, let's say, a cow god. And let's say that Greek folks, they make their way over to this spot with the cow god, and instead of saying no, your cow god is incorrect, they'll say no, you know what, that cow god was actually Zeus in another form. It's when he was seducing another person in the form of a cow. So sometimes you know, this happens in like a bunch of different, like especially when you see like how Christianity spread throughout the world, people interpret the religion in their own ways, but stuff like I guess mythology, sometimes it does have like a socio-political aspect to it. Oops, all Zeus. Exactly. So Zeus's symbols include lightning bolts and eagles, and here are some cool pictures of him, but we're gonna go ahead and jump into his equivalent in Digimon, which is Jupitermon, or as it says in the katakana in the Japanese characters here, this actually spells out Jupitermon. So Jupitermon. But you know, I think it's fair for English speakers or anyone else that pronounces as Jupiter to just say Jupitermon, right? So this is Jupitermon. He looks pretty cool, right? He has these dumbbells. He's gold. He's freaking gold. So just like his counterpart, he lives. He does. He does. So he also presides over thunder, the weather, and the heavens, but he's also a divine, what did I put here? Judge, jury, and executioner of justice. So he doles out punishment to evildoers. And this kind of goes with what Testosterdal was saying of like, how do we know that Jupiter's idea of morality is like objectively good, right? I feel like that might be an ongoing theme with Jupitermon, is like he doles out punishment, but how do we know that he's good at deciding who deserves punishment, right? So as you can see, he has these two big hammers, and this is what he uses in battle. So he uses these hammers in battle, and they form thunderclouds. And then they also, one of his moves is to engrave a mark of punishment on his opponent, and that person gets punished through, I think it was like lightning bolts. I actually forgot what it was. But he can also channel high voltage into his body. So this goes a lot into his symbolism of being the god of thunder and lightning. So he's definitely like associated with this this element of thunder and lightning. He also has a different mode entirely, and this is called Wrath mode. So in this mode, he now wields a sword. If we go back and forth, so he has his cool golden dumbbells, right? We're also going to look at his design shortly, but for now, let's go into his other mode, which is called Wrath mode. So he wields a sword called Keraunos, or I think it's Keraunos or Keraunos. Literally, this is Greek for thunderbolt. And he does both physical or elemental damage. And he can channel the power of the heavens to render judgment. What this means is that he can essentially call on the heavens to say, like, you know that saying of like, if I'm lying, strike me down. May God strike me down where I stand. Like you might see it in like sitcoms or television shows or like other media. Sometimes you'll hear that. Basically, this attack is that. It's Jupitermon saying that like, if you have committed, wrong, if you have been evil, then let lightning strike you down right now. And thus, lightning comes and strikes down his enemies. So, yeah, those are basically like his powers. He debuted in 2013 in the game called Digimon Crusader. Yeah, Wrath mode does in fact slay. We're also gonna take a look at his design right now. So this is his default versus his Wrath mode. Is there a move where he chains some loser to a stone with a bird eating its liver? Not yet, but we don't have a Prometheusmon yet. So maybe in the future. Or maybe that was just limited to Prometheus. Maybe he just really didn't like Prometheus. So let's do a little bit of a visual analysis as well. So, I'm an art historian. I do like looking at pictures and observing them for quite a while. So let's actually take a good look at his design. So let's focus first here on Jupitermon's main form. So as you can see, he's almost all of the Olympus XII are anthropomorphic, which is just a fancy word to say they are shaped like a human. You can also just say humanoid. But what really stands out in terms of his design is that he is entirely covered in gold armor. There's also a couple of red accents, and then he also has this big old cape with wings on it, like very visible wings. And then he also has little like mini wings on his head. I'll use my cursor here. It's on his head, and then here on his arms, and then a little bit on his legs too. Which is, by the way, a really good color palette. But he is entirely covered in armor, so much so that you actually can't see any of like, if you assume that this is a person in armor, you can't see the face, you can't see hands, you can't see an inkling of anything organic. This is gonna be like, for now that might not seem like a big deal, but when you look at the other Olympus XII, all of them have some kind of skin showing, whether it's part of their face, whether it's like most of their body, right? Like, not some of them, sorry, almost all of them like have some kind of like organicness showing, some kind of humanity, even though they're not human showing. But Jupitermon is kind of the exception. He's literally the only one that is almost completely covered. There's even another Digimon that mirrors him. This is gonna be Plutomon, but even you can see his eyes, you can see like certain parts of his body. Jupitermon doesn't even have that. So it gives me this feeling of just being mechanical, cold, impartial, which fits that he is thus like a judge, right? He's a judge and jury and executioner of like divine will. So it makes sense that like basically this is a machine making these judgments, and he is not swayed by emotion. He just doles out the punishment as he sees fit, right? So I think that with that it kind of makes sense. And then the wings too, the whole motif of like having feathers and wings, it kind of adds this feeling of divinity. So not only is he like a machine, not only is he like cold and impartial, he's also divine. So it very much fits with this theme of being a divine judge. You start to see this you start to see a little bit of a change with wrath mode though. So wrath mode is this one over here in the lower corner. So now it seems like the armor has split open and you're seeing a little bit more of like Zeus's power in the form of like these lightning bolts, right? However, you're still not really seeing an organic body. You're not seeing any skin. You're not seeing like any part of like you know, what might make him human-like. Instead, you're just seeing like pure force, like pure, whether it's lightning, fire, glory. You're seeing that peek through instead. You do get a little bit of his hair. It's a little bit hard to see here, but you are seeing a little bit of hair as well. So there's a teensy bit. There's like a teensy bit of like, you know, like I know I'm equating like human features to like humanity and like empathy and stuff, but like you see a little bit of it here in this form as well, which kind of goes with this theme that like, well, now Jupiter's mad. Now he's so mad that he can no longer be impartial. He's so mad that like, you know, he's like blinded by rage. No skin. It's called modesty. But also if we're talking a little bit about shape language is this kind of subconscious like when you see certain shapes, because of how they're usually seen in nature, our subconscious kind of like starts to make associations. So when you see, for example, like a straight horizontal line or a square, we usually associate that with stability, with like nothing too crazy going on. If you see something circular, usually that associates with like, depending on the context, it could be cuteness, it could be something soft. But if you see a whole bunch of triangles, zigzags, and points, that usually in your subconscious reminds you of danger, because sharp points are sharp. They hurt if you poke them. But also in nature, things that are sharp, things like spiny flowers or lightning bolts, they can hurt us. So whoever designed this, which I think might be Moriyama So, because he did a lot of the designs for Digimon Crusaders. He added all of these different like pointy parts to Jupitermon Wrath mode. Whereas here you see more round shapes, you see more like geometric like squares and stuff. So like, he's more of like a stable figure here, but here he's like so spiky, he's so dangerous, right? And then the last thing that I put here is that it reminds me of the story of Semele or Semel, I think. I don't know how to pronounce her name, but there's this story of so Zeus, he went gallivanting again. He met a woman and got her pregnant. Her name is Semele. And Juno, or Hera, got jealous and told Semele, like, while she was disguised, Hera went to Semele, disguised herself as an old woman, and was like, hey, Semele, I hear that you're dating. I hear that you got preggers via Zeus, the king of the gods. How do you know that it's not just a regular guy saying that he's Zeus? Well, I think you're getting duped, you know? You know what you should do? You should go to your boyfriend, your boy toy, and tell him to show you his true form, so that you know that it's Zeus, right? So Semele does this. She goes up to Zeus and she says like, I want you to promise me to, I want you to grant me one wish, essentially. And Zeus is like, yeah, sure, whatever. I'll grant whatever wish you want, you know? She asks him, can you reveal to me your true form as the god Zeus? And Zeus is like, oh no, like, no, I can't do that, because human mortals can't look at a god in its true form. You will literally burn up and die. But no matter what he says, Semele is like, no, I'm not gonna believe that you're Zeus until you show me that you're Zeus. So Zeus eventually gives in and he's fine. He's like, fine, I'll show you my true form, but like, I'm telling you, you're gonna die. So he does it and he reveals his true form, and it's so glorious, it's so shining, and it's so overwhelming that Semele bursts into flames and dies. And her baby does get saved. That's gonna be a weird story that we're gonna cover next time, but Semele does die because she beholds Zeus's true form for the first time. So that kind of reminds me of Wrath mode. Like, here, like, literally his true form is bursting at the seams. This lightning and this fire, this flame, it's bursting out, and even just looking at it can probably make you catch on fire. Worth it! Samuel's last words. Totally worth it. I totally just banged a god. That's probably what she was thinking. But yeah, so that's Jupitermon. That's a little bit about his design, and we're actually not done talking about Jupitermon just yet, because there's actually, so once again with Digimon digivolve. They change form over time. So all the Olympus XII Digimon, they are in mega form, which is kind of like one of the highest forms that you could take as a Digimon, but they usually start out as a Digi-Egg, and then as you go through like the lifespan of a Digimon, they go from like a little baby, a little squishy baby, to what's called a rookie or child form. So if you watch Digimon Adventure back in the day, then rookie level would be like Agumon, Gabumon, right? So that's almost like their default form. And then they become what's known as champion or adult form. So Jupitermon's adult form is Aegiomon. So this is the form before. This is what he looks like before he becomes Jupitermon, to put it simply. So this is Aegiomon. If you take a look at his features, he's a goat man. He is half goat, half man. Goat man. Exactly. And it's really interesting that this is his kind of like prior form, because it very much references Zeus's childhood. Now, if you remember, Rhea hid Zeus on another island, and Zeus was raised by a bunch of nymphs, which are nature spirits essentially, and a goat. This goat is said to one of the nymphs that was supposed to take care of Zeus. She couldn't produce milk from her breast, so instead she got a goat named Amalthea. So in some stories, Amalthea is the nymph, and in some stories, Amalthea is the goat. But nonetheless, Amalthea, the milk of this goat was what nursed the infant Zeus. So that goat is already associated with Zeus in that way, but then the skin of that goat, the hide of that goat, would eventually become what's called the Aegis. Or the Aegis. The Aegis. The Aegis. The Aegis. But yeah, so this would become the Aegis, which is basically like a shield. A shield of sorts. And another way that this kind of goes into Zeus's story, his infant story, is that the name Aegiomon, or actually, if we read the katakana, it says Aegiomon. This could either be called this could either be named after the Aegis, the divine animal skin, or Aegipan, which is a goatman offspring of Zeus and Aiga. Aiga is one of the nymphs that helped nurse Zeus. So basically what I'm saying is Aegiomon or Aegiomon. I can't freaking say his name properly. I gotta read the katakana again. Aegiomon. So Aegiomon is just all about the infancy of Zeus. So it makes sense that he would eventually become Jupitermon, right? And then one last detail about Aegiomon is that his evolved form is called Aegiochusmon. But I was doing research on this Digimon, and I went to a Japanese site, and when I did Google Translate, it translated the name not as Aegiochusmon, but as Aegiotheusmon, which I think is interesting because Theus is kind of a Greek root for the word god, or a god. But yeah, so all that to say is that like Aegiomon is basically like representative of Zeus's infancy, and now he's become Jupiter. So I just thought that was neat. We got a few more gods to go. we got through Titamon, Jupitermon, and Aegiomon, and now we are moving on to Poseidon. So this is another character. This is another interesting guy. So he's known as Poseidon in Greek mythology, but in Roman mythology he's just known as Neptune. Also the namesake of the, what is it, 7th? 8th planet? 8th planet in the solar system. The blue one. The big blue one. The big blue house. The big blue planet. So yeah, this is Poseidon. Or I guess as they would pronounce it in Greece, Poseidon. So he is the god of seas, oceans, storms, earthquakes, and horses. And he's interesting because we can talk about the mythology, but we can also talk about kind of like the meta or how these gods were formed, right? So Some basic stuff out of the way. He's the middle son of Cronus and Rhea. He also has a lot of consorts and victims and offspring. A lot, like a lot, including Pegasus, by the way, the horse with the wings. Yeah, he made that. So he has a lot. So in terms of the meta of Poseidon, he actually might be a really, really old deity, maybe even older than Zeus. He actually might have been the supreme deity back in what's called Mycenaean time. So Mycenae was the kind of the predecessor culture to Greece. So before there was like Greek religion, culture, etc., etc., there was a culture called, or sorry, I'm actually not super well versed in like Mycenaean history, but basically the Greeks of like Homer's time saw themselves as the successors to what's called the Mycenaean Greeks or Mycenaean Greeks. So we actually have a couple of really cool sources from this time period of like Mycenaean Greece, including the names of gods. And one of the gods that is very prominent is Poseidon. I think his name was translated as like Posidoe or something like that. But there's some clues saying that like he might have been like the supreme god rather than Zeus. Not only that, he wasn't just god of the seas, he might have been god of like the earth, which is one of the clues to that is that one of his epithets, one of his titles is the Earth Shaker, which also explains why he's the god of earthquakes. He also might have chthonic origins. I mentioned this in my last stream, but if you don't know what that word means, chthonic means basically anything referring to the underworld. So not only might he have been the supreme god, not only was he possibly an ocean god, not only was he a god of the earthquakes, he might have been also the god of the underworld at one point. We don't know for sure, but there's just a lot of like hints towards that. He has some sacred symbols as well, such as tuna, delicious, delicious tuna, dolphins, hippocampi, which is basically like horses of the ocean, but also horses of the land. Horses are like a strong associate, like they, I don't know, bro is just very connected to horses. He even sometimes takes the form of a horse in order to do some pretty dastardly deeds, not done dirt cheap. But yeah, just remember that horses are one of his like main symbols. And then another thing is that he wields a trident in battle. And a trident is what you see here. It's basically a spear, but it's like, it has 3 points. So when we go over to the Digimon equivalent, you might see some similar things. This is Neptunemon. So all of the Digimon in the Olympus 12, they actually didn't come out at the same time. I probably should have said that right at the beginning, but some Digimon were just released like about 10 years ago, but some of them are as old as Neptunemon, which debuted in 2005. 2005! 20 years ago! He debuted 20 years ago, can you believe it? So, and we're gonna go through this at the very end too, like on Friday, is that certain Digimon like Mercurymon, Neptunemon, they came out like way before the idea of the Olympus 12 was even like really a thing. Neptunemon, he debuted in 2005 in Digimon Axel Nature Genome. This is a VPET. And he presides over all aquatic Digimon, and he lives in a place called the Abyss Sanctuary. He also, if you take a cool look at him, he has what's called Blue Digizoid Scale Mail, which is just a fancy way to talk about his armor. So, he fights with his spear, his tri-pointed spear, which is kind of like a trident, except that like if you take a look at Poseidon's trident, it's almost like all on one plane. It's almost like what you would see in like farming, right? Whereas this trident is like, it's a little bit more, I guess, three-dimensional. I don't really know how to put it into words, but it does have 3 points. Sorry, I'm pointing here. Yeah, there we go. So yeah, it does have 3 points to it. I think it's cool that it's shark-shaped. I do think it's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at his design. So he was also possibly designed by Moriyama So. It's a tripod! Exactly, it's a tripod. Yeah, actually this is a really good look at his trident over here. His tri-pointed spear. So, to be frank, this guy is a mermaid, or a merman. Right? Let's go ahead and take a look back at this one. So let's take a look at his design right now. He has a fish body and the upper part of like a person. It's more humanoid, right? He's wearing armor that looks very close to like Japanese samurai armor, and in terms of color scheme, overall it's cool colors, so that would be like blue, purple, with a little bit of red and yellow as well, or rather red and gold. Sorry, I'm like pointing on my OBS, but I realize it's not like pointing accurately like on the screen. So here we go. We have gold, we have red, but overall it's like blue, light blue, and purple, right? Let's see. Yeah, he has fish features, which is very apt because he's like the king of like aquatic creatures. So he has these gills over here. And what's interesting, I don't know if it's easy to see, but he actually has two different versions of his design. In this version, he has like a monstrous mouth. But if you go back to this version, oh, you know what? I didn't get a good picture. Maybe I need a better one. He actually has human jaws sometimes. So sometimes he's seen as like with a human jawline, but other times he's seen with like a monstrous one. You would see this version, the monstrous one, more in older forms of media. Nowadays you would see him more with like the human shaped jawline. What did I put here? So yeah, his armor kind of looks like Japanese samurai, but there's like very tiny like Chinese features too, like the little gold accents here, the ones that swirl in. That's a little bit like, it reminds me of like Journey to the West, just a teensy bit. So yeah, he initially had that humanoid like jawline, but then it got redesigned for X-Cross Wars, but then they brought it back. Every version of Poseidon is goated, not gonna lie. He's kind of weird though. He's kind of weird though. But you know, different strokes for different folks. Tri-point spear seems to be a reference to, yeah, so the tri-point spear seems to be like his trident as well. So yeah, that's basically the equivalent in terms of like how closely it matches. I feel like out of the older Olympus 12, he does match his respective god like pretty well. Because he's the god of the sea, right? I think if we wanted to really make him accurate to the mythology, maybe some kind of like earthquake. Maybe he like strikes his trident onto the earth and it makes like an earthquake. But otherwise, I think he's a pretty faithful reproduction of the god Neptune, right? The reason why I bring that up is when we look at Mercurymon and Marsmon and Minervamon, my gosh, they are not what you would usually expect from a representation of Mars, Minerva, and Mercury. They're so different, but it's pretty cool to see. But otherwise, Neptune, pretty faithful to his inspiration, which is Neptune and Poseidon. All right, so this next person actually isn't part of the Olympus 12. He's not even part of the Deconcentus or the Olympians. He's not usually included, but sometimes he is as well. So this is Hades, also known as Pluto. By the way, his Roman name, Pluto is one of his Roman names, but he also has a couple of other Roman names such as Dispater, like Dispater. But a lot of media refers to Pluto as his main Roman name. So this is the god of the underworld. So a little thing about that, after all of the Saturn's children got expelled from Saturn, after he vomited up all his kids, the three brothers, which is Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades, they actually drew lots to see what they would rule over the earth, or what they would rule on earth, what they would rule over basically. So they just drew lots. Zeus ended up ruling the sky. Poseidon ended up ruling the sea. And that left the underworld to Hades. So he, you know, one might argue that he got the short end of the stick, but also it was kind of appropriate for him because he seems to be more of a somber guy. I think that's another big thing. So I'm going to skip right to this bullet point right here. Because of how the West sees death, usually he's, especially in like certain pop culture, he's sometimes portrayed as evil. He wasn't like, I wouldn't say that he's evil. There is some like weird stuff that he does do, especially when it comes to his wife Persephone, but he wasn't necessarily evil. He was more stern. He was a little bit more sobering. He's not the guy to, you know, be laughing his butt off, you know, but he wasn't necessarily evil. He was kind of like what Gojikins said, the only one with a day job. So like he was more or less like doing his job, but he himself wasn't evil. But if you see like Disney's Hercules, he's like the bad guy in that, right? Because he's the god presiding over death. You kind of also see this with Egyptian mythology as well. He wields a bident, which is basically a trident, but with just 2 points instead of 3. So not Biden, not bidet, a bident. So so let's go back up to this one over here. So remember how he said that Poseidon was a very, very old god and that he might have also been like an underworld god? There's a theory that Hades used to be one of Poseidon's epithets, right? And what I mean by that is, once again, an epithet is a title. So one of Poseidon's title is Poseidon the Earthshaker. He might have had another title that was like Poseidon of the Underworld, right? However, over time, that version of Poseidon might have become Hades. So that would be like, for example, I'll give you another example of an epithet. There is an English king, or a British king, or an English king, I forget, named Richard the Lionheart, right? So he's called the Lionheart because he's very courageous. So let's say that Richard the Lionheart, he gets another epithet called Richard the Warrior. Let's say that, right? So you have Richard the Lionheart, you get Richard the Warrior. Can you imagine that maybe people tell stories about Richard the Lionheart and then they tell stories of Richard the Warrior, but eventually they stop realizing that those two are one and the same. They think that Richard the Lionheart and Richard the Warrior are two different people. And eventually they start calling Richard the Warrior something else. Let's say that they call him Dick. They call him Dick. Right? Because that's a that's a nickname for Richard. So you got Dick the Warrior, you got Richard the Lionheart, and once again, like, people just keep thinking that these are two separate people until eventually people just know them as these two figures, Dick the Warrior and Richard the Lionheart. So that's essentially what happened. That what might have happened with Hades is that it went from Poseidon the Earthshaker, Poseidon, let's say, of the water, and Poseidon of the underworld, and eventually Poseidon of the underworld went through a different name, such as Hades, and then Hades essentially became his own person. So that's just one theory. It's not like, you know, don't take that as gospel, don't take that as like the truth. It's just a theory. I mean, among all the Greek gods and what they do, he's the most tame one. Yeah, he kind of is. He literally is. Like, there is one story that, like, you know, does not paint him in a great light, but he's also out of the the three brothers of Poseidon, Zeus, and Hades, Hades does the least amount of assault. Like, and that's really saying something. So one of Hades' most well-known stories is the abduction of Persephone. So basically, he abducted a spring goddess named Persephone. Her Roman name is Prosperina, and basically she became the queen of the underworld. However, she was also the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of the harvest. Yeah, you know what? I might as well just tell the whole myth right now, because we're also going to go into it with Demeter as well. So one of Hades' sisters is Demeter. She's the goddess of the harvest, the goddess of fertility, and she has a daughter named Persephone. Hades decides to just basically kidnap her. So he does that, and then she lives in the underworld, and while she is gone, Demeter is in a rage and in despair, and because she's the god of fertility, she makes the whole earth despair with her. So basically everything dies, or rather, like, plants and crops die, and she essentially causes winter to happen on Earth. Eventually Zeus negotiates with Hades that, like, look, you gotta return Persephone back to her mother, and Hades says sure. But before Persephone goes back to her mother, Hades is like, hey, do you want a meal on your way out? And he gives her a pomegranate. Now, if you've ever had a pomegranate before, you eat the seeds, or you eat the membrane around the seeds. So Persephone ate 6 pomegranate seeds. But because she had eaten the food of the underworld, it meant that she would have to return to the underworld for 6 months. So for half the year, she's going to be with Hades, causing autumn and causing winter. And then for the other 6 months, she would be with her mother, causing spring and causing summer. So that was kind of like the ancient Greek explanation for the seasons. So with that story, Hades seems like a dick, right? There are different interpretations of this myth, though. There's some interpretations that say that it was actually Zeus's fault because Hades might have not even wanted a gal. He was like, you know what, I'm okay, I'm fine in the underworld, whatever. But Zeus is like, nah. How about I give you Persephone? Because Persephone also happens to be Zeus's daughter. So Zeus is like, nah. I'll give you my daughter. I don't need to ask the mother. I'm sure she's fine with it. Go ahead, just take her. You're good, bro. And then when Demeter is like, freaking Hades just stole our kid. Then Zeus is like, oh, okay, And actually, if you look at the actual, like, myth that tells this story, there's the sun god named Helios who sees Hades take Persephone away. And when Demeter goes to the sun god, she's like, hey, did you see what happened to my daughter? The sun god Helios is like, yeah, Hades stole her away, but I think you're fine. Like, he's kind of a catch. Like he doesn't assault no one. He has like a high-paying job. He has all the riches. He's Zeus's brother. I think it's fine. I think you should just let him have her, actually. And if anything, that just shows just how much of a patriarchy the society was. So yeah, so cool to hear how stories evolve and change through the art of oral storytelling. Yeah, right. This is just that's what I love about mythology, is that it's always evolving. Yeah, for real. Like Helios, the literal sun god, is like, yeah, you got really lucky. It could have been any of these other guys. Like, you should count yourself lucky, because it could have been Poseidon. So that's pretty bad, right? That shows like they did not think much of women in this society. But yeah, so and then another aspect of the story is that by Hades offering Persephone the pomegranate, he didn't force her to eat it, by the way. He offered it to her. Some interpret that as Hades offering Persephone the choice of staying in the underworld. Which, you know, it's up to your interpretation. It's completely up to you if you want to be like, nope, Hades is a dick. Like, I think what he did was really sleazy. Or you could interpret it as like, he was offering the choice of like, oh yeah, Persephone, if you want to stick around here, you can. Like I said, out of the three brothers, Hades doesn't ever cheat on Persephone. He doesn't go after any other people. He doesn't assault anyone. His relationship with Persephone is actually one of the most stable in all of Greek mythology, and that's really saying something. So yeah, even though he did abduct her, like, oddly enough, he's kind of like the most okay out of like the three brothers. So it's kind of crazy how that works out. I mean, you would assume the rules about food are known by all. Yeah, exactly. Like it's also like this whole thing of like, what is there anything that like that is being communicated that would have been fully known by Greek people in those days? So with all of that said about Hades, let's go over to his Digimon equivalent, which is Plutomon. I think he's really cool looking, actually. So just like his equivalent in the mythology, Plutomon presides over the realm of the dead. And like Jupiter, he judges wicked Digimon. So he himself is not evil, but he is intimidating. And he uses, at least according to the Digimon encyclopedia, he uses cruel tactics to frighten and punish Digimon. And even to the point where like even good Digimon are like, oh god, like I don't wanna mess around with that guy. So in battle, he usually actually he doesn't use any kind of weaponry. He uses his own body and his armor. So if you see like his shoulder pads, they look like jaws. It's because they are. He actually uses the mouths on his shoulders and on his chest to attack. And he can also release dark energy. So he's basically a dark reflection of Jupitermon, whereas Jupitermon, like, he doles out judgment, so does Plutomon, but he does it with like kind of harsher tactics. Very sleek, much wow. Yeah, so let's talk about that, right? So let's talk about his design. In many ways, he's super similar to Jupitermon's design. So he's also humanoid. He also is almost entirely fully covered in armor. He also has a really cool cape. But you do see a little bit more like organic matter on him. Some human features. One of them being his eyes. So you can see his eyes. With Jupitermon, you can't even see his eyes. He also has hair, by the way. Like, and what I think is cool is that he and Jupitermon have the same hair color. It's like this kind of light gray, right? So he also has the tattered cape, dark colors. He looks like he's an evil lord, and he has a bunch of mouths, which might be a reference to a theme that you see in Christian imagery called the Hellmouth, or the Hellmouth, as they used to say. Basically, it's just this idea that hell, like the entrance to it, is a giant mouth. But also the fact that you see like the jaws on the shoulder pads. This is also a reference to Cerberus. Cerberus was the guard dog of Hades, of the realm of the underworld. It was a three-headed dog. So one, like the two heads are his shoulders, and then the third head would be his own head. So it is kind of a reference to that. And he even has Cerberusmon in his evolutionary line. So there's that. And then finally, if you look at the crest on his head, like this part right here, it splits off into two. That might be a reference to the bident. Not Biden, not the bidet, but the bident, which is basically a trident, but with two parts rather than three. And then the tail kind of looks like a spine. It looks like a spinal part of the skeleton, right? But yeah, so his whole design is basically meant to be kind of like a dark reflection of Jupitermon, but arguably like a little bit more human in a way, because you see a little bit more like human details. But otherwise, still very much covered in armor, and just a lot of references to like Cerberus, a lot of references to Hades and Hell, and all that good stuff. But yeah, so this is Plutomon. I think he's really cool. I think his design is very sleek, very, very neat, and I like the tail a lot. You mentioned earlier that Western interpretations of death and Hades tend to be more evil and sinister. Do you think this design plays into that a bit? I definitely, 100%. Because, like I said, like, in the mythology, Pluto himself is not actually evil. He is, like I said, he's not the kind of guy that would, like, be bursting out laughing. He's not known to be a very jovial person. But he is known to be merciful. There's a lot of myths in which, like, someone is trying to get a soul back from Hades. They're trying to revive someone. And usually Hades is like, if you do me this task, I'll let go of the soul. And he's usually a man of his word. That's the cool part, is that, like, usually if someone, like, fulfills that task, he will, like, fulfill the promise, right? And like I said, out of all the, like, relationships, his and Persephone's are one of the most stable that you see in mythology. So he himself was not evil, but here, Plutomon, it's kind of questionable. It seems like he kind of is. Like, it seems like he kind of is, but I feel like if there is to be a storyline between Plutomon and Jupitermon, I feel like it would go into this whole thing of, like, how do you know that, like, Jupitermon's morality is the right morality? How do we know that Plutomon isn't the one that's correct, right? If there even is a correct. So, but yes, testosterone. I completely agree. I feel like this is actually going into the whole, like, sinister underworld bit. Actually, kind of reminds me of Spawn. Like, now that I, like, look at it from afar, it kind of reminds me of Spawn. So Zeus has a lightning bolt in a hand, a spear, Hades a bident, and Poseidon with a trident. Yeah, it almost like the number of weapons almost multiplies, right? Or the number of, I guess, points, because the lightning bolt is almost like a 1 point, bident is 2 points, and then trident is 3 points. So yeah, I didn't really think about that, but yes. You can have the soul if you retile my bathroom. And then, like, later on, oh, you did it! Yeah, sure, you can have the soul, whatever. So yeah, like, I do think that Hades and Plutomon are very interesting figures. So yeah, we have 2 more goddesses to talk about, but also there is an extra part at the very end where we theory craft what other Greco-Roman inspired Digimon might look like, or what they might be like. Okay, so now we're getting out of the realm of gods and into the realm of goddesses. So these are female gods, and the first one we're gonna go over, her name is Demeter, but her Roman name is Ceres. Actually, it's pronounced Charis, but in like, at least in American English, I don't know about British and Australian and New Zealand English, but I've heard Ceres, Charis. Yeah, it's kind of the same with Jupitermon would have actually been, or Jupiter would have been Jupiter, and Juno would have been Juno. Ceres would have been Charis, right? So this is the goddess of agriculture, harvest, fertility, grain, poppies, and the seasons. So she is kind of the other part of that story that I had told you guys about Persephone. So she is the mother of Persephone. So she is the goddess of the harvest. She's the goddess of like crops. She makes everything grow. And kind of like how Poseidon was a really old god that might have been the supreme god, might have been the underworld god, might have been the earth shaker god, might have been the ocean god. Demeter, she might at that same time, she also has roots as being the earth mother. So in the story I told right at the beginning of the stream, where you have Gaia, the earth mother who gives birth to the Cyclops, to the Hecatoncheires, to the Titans, that role might have actually been Demeter at some point. And Poseidon and Demeter were actually, they were kind of a pair, but in a lot of the mythology, especially some of the ones nowadays, it's not always consensual. It's not always consensual. There is a specific myth where Poseidon tries to assault Demeter, but in the form of a horse. And they just include that because she gives birth to a horse. So poppies, why so specific about poppies? I think that might be an association that she gained when she became like a Roman goddess. I actually don't remember why that is, but she is associated with poppies. It is one of her sacred symbols. Yeah, so that's Demeter. And yeah, one of her most notable stories is Persephone's abduction because it explains the seasons, right? There's also a really interesting side story within that myth. It's really odd because Hades kidnaps Persephone, right? And then Demeter, who is the mother, she is depressed, and then she plunges Earth into this winter, right? Because she's so unhappy. There's like a weird side story that is just like, as she was being sad, she decided to like disguise herself as a human and then go to like a royal family and be their maid, essentially. I guess to take her mind off of things. Like, but then like she starts to adore the baby that she's babysitting so much that she wants him to be immortal. And the way that she does that is she has this magic fire in which if she holds the baby over the fire, she essentially burns away the infant's mortality, so he becomes immortal. So she does this every night, and it's like the more mortality she burns away, the more immortal the baby will become. However, it looks pretty bad, right? It looks pretty bad if you walk in on Demeter and she's holding a baby by the feet over a fire. That looks pretty bad, right? That's exactly what happens in the mythology. So the infant's mother walks in on Demeter holding the baby by its feet over an open fire. And of course, as any mother would, or any caring mother at least, she's like, what the frick are you doing? Like, what the heck? What in Zeus's ballsack are you doing? You know? And the funny part is Demeter isn't even like, oh my god, no, like let me explain. And instead, Demeter gets mad. She gets like hella mad. She's like, how dare you interrupt my ceremony? Your son could have been immortal, but you had to mess it up. And you know what you have to do now? You have to build a temple to me. Because you messed up. Like, that's literally how the story goes. Is that like Demeter gets mad at her. It's like, you interrupted my baby burning ceremony, and and first of all, how dare you? Second of all, how dare you? Demeter with the baby over the flame. God forbid a woman have hobbies. She's just, I'm just doing my thing. I'm just making barbecue, and here you are. I just came to have a good time, and I feel like you're being mean to me. Greek mythology bad communication 101. Sounds like a lot of people in these stories are due to poor interpersonal skills. Baby Q. Oh no, not the baby back ribs. Barbecue sauce. Now, an interesting thing is, the reason why I mentioned that story is because there's actually a very similar one in ancient Egyptian mythology as well. There's a similar story where Isis, the wife to another god named Osiris, her husband gets murdered, and she also ends up wandering the earth. Really sad. Like, just really sad, and then she disguises herself as a mortal, takes care of like a rich family's baby, adores the baby so much that she wants to burn away its mortality, gets caught. Isis also gets mad and is like, you interrupted my ceremony. Like, so it's like, why is this such a prevalent theme, you know? Like, why is this theme of like, oh, I love this baby, let's burn it. Like, why is that so prevalent in this time period? There probably is an explanation for it. Probably there was some cross-cultural you know, contact. That's probably the explanation, but it's also just like, why why does this just keep happening? So yeah, so that is a little bit about Demeter, Ceres, right? She's the goddess of agriculture, harvest, fertility, but she is also known to have a wrathful side because her daughter was taken away from her, right? So keep that in mind, because now we're going to be looking at her Digimon equivalent, which is Ceresmon. And yes, if you read the Japanese katakana, it wouldn't be Ceresmon, it would be Ceresmon. So Ceresmon. So she actually has two-ish forms. Yes, she is a sexy lady, but she is also a giant fuck you bird. And I know I don't usually swear in front of the students, but how else am I supposed to explain what that bird is? Like, look at it. But yeah, so Ceresmon is mainly this giant bird. So this bird is so massive that it actually has a forest growing on its back, and the forest actually has a name. The forest is called Karpos Hule, which means fruit it literally just means a fruit forest, and it's growing on its back. If you look really closely at the bird, you'll see, wait, here we go, here's my cursor. If you look really closely at the bird, you'll see that on its forehead is a lady. It's a gal. So this is her. This is actually Ceresmon's true form, and it's known as Ceresmon medium. Not large, not small, medium, as in like a psychic medium. So this is actually Ceresmon's true form. So she's usually chilling on top of the bird over here. But yeah, out of all the designs of the Olympus 12, I feel like Ceresmon is probably like in my top like 2. Like, I feel like Ceresmon and I'll probably say Hadesmon are probably my no, actually Junomon's pretty up there too. So I like this design a lot. In terms of personality, Ceresmon will feed, shelter, and heal weak or hungry Digimon, but she can also become fearsome. So she can also curse people. She can also like say, you know what, F you, I hate you. And she can actually attack them. And her attacks include magma. So the bird can just fire magma. It can just fire magma at their opponent for some reason. But another really cool thing is the fruits on top of the in Karpos Hule, the fruit forest. If they're not ripe, they're actually poisonous. So one of her attacks is to actually fire those fruits at the enemy, and they will poison the enemy. But wherever the fruit lands, like in the ground around, it actually fertilizes that land. So let's say that she's attacking someone down on, you know, underneath her. She attacks them. She defeats them with the poison, but the land around where the guy was defeated would actually become fertile. It would actually grow new fruits. So I think that's actually a really cool, like, thematically speaking. And then another attack that she can do is she could just slam her gigantic bird body into someone. I think that is most effective. So I feel like thematically speaking, Ceresmon's probably one of the more interesting ones because she really goes with the theme of like fertility, because yeah, she has the forest, but the forest can also be poisonous to kind of reflect that she has this wrathful side to her. But that wrathful forest can also grow new things. And the whole thing with like the bird being able to fire magma, I don't think that's random either, because the whole thing with volcanoes is they're known for destructive power. So like the lava and the magma can of course destroy things, but the earth afterwards will be fertile. It's actually so fertile that you can like start growing new things. So magma is destructive, but just like with the poisonous fruits, it can most likely make the earth around it very fertile as well. So I think Ceresmon is probably like one of the most effective ways to show this idea of fertility and kind of like the two sides of the same coin of fertility. Like it could be really scary and destructive, but it can also be really nurturing and creative. So I just think she's neat. Okay. So let's take a look at its design. So the normal form is this giant bird, right? And it is kind of apt with Demeter's symbols because Demeter does have bird symbols. So that does kind of like, you know, go into this design. And I kind of like that the head kind of looks like Aegiomon. If you watched Adventure 1999, Digimon Adventure 1999, it kind of looks like Aegiomon, but also a newer Digimon called Titamon, which you see in Digimon Liberator. But nonetheless, it is meant to look like a bird. The medium, so like the hot lady, sexy lady, she has a humanoid design. Remember how I said with Jupitermon is kind of the exception within the Olympus 12 of like having armor but showing nothing? So this is a good example of what I mean. Ceresmon does have armor, but parts of her body are still exposed. In a tasteful way, I might add. But as you can see, her arms and legs are armored, right? But then she also has like the human parts of her, or humanoid parts of her showing, but she also has like plant stuff on her shoulders, on her legs. And like I said, I think that just does a really good job of going into the whole like fertility motif. And another thing is that even the like armor parts of her body, even the parts that should look like machinery, they're a little bit more organic. If you look at the lines that are shown, when you think of like say the Transformers, usually they're drawn with straight lines, very geometric shapes. If you look at the armor that she's wearing, there's a lot of curvy lines. There's lots of lines that look like they could be floral or like vines, you know? So even the fact that she's armored doesn't prevent her from having this whole motif of being organic, of being part of nature, and I just think that's really cool. And then the lower half of her face is visible, kind of like with other femme-presenting Digimon like Aegiomon, Rosemon, and more. So yeah, her face is mostly obscured, but you still see like it's not really that visible, but you do still see her jawline, her human jawline. So yeah, Ceresmon I think is really neat. We're gonna come back to her and Hadesmon when we talk about what if there was a Persephonemon, right? Or a Prosperimon. But before we get into that, we have our last deity for the day, and this is Hera, also known as Juno or Juno. So she is pretty well known, especially if you study Greek and Roman culture. She's infamous because just as Zeus has a lot of consorts, a lot of victims, a lot of offspring, Juno or Hera is like usually the one to victimize them. She's usually there to make it even worse. So yeah, so this is Hera. In Greek, her name probably would have been pronounced something like Ira or Era. The H would maybe not have been voiced. I actually don't know. I need to study up on my like ancient Greek linguistics, but yeah. Otherwise, if you speak American English, I don't know if this also goes with like British English too, but Hera, right? Juno, but in Roman times, it probably would have been closer to Juno, like with a Y sound, like a y. So Hera is the goddess of matrimony, women, family, and childbirth. Hera will straight murk anyone she gives no hex. Exactly! That's kind of what she's known for. Is like, rather than being sympathetic to someone who is like a victim of Zeus, she'll be like, you know what? I hate you. And I think you should die. Because a lot of it is like, oh, she must have seduced him. She must have seduced him. So, before we get into that, Hera is yet another one of Cronus and Rhea's children. So she is the youngest daughter, meaning that her and Zeus are brother and sister, by the way. and yet they are also husband and wife. Also, I kind of glazed over it just a little bit, but do you remember how I said that Persephone is the daughter of Demeter, and how Zeus is her father? Demeter and Zeus are also brother and sister. So not only did Zeus do the incest thing once, he did it twice. So so kind of messed up. But anyway, I would argue she very much gives a lot of hex, and that is the problem. Not just die suffer. Yeah, that too. The family shrub. So yeah, Zeus did take Hera as a consort, and she is the mother to quite a couple of kids. So the most famous ones are Ares and Hephaestus, who we're actually going to see next time in the part 2 of this presentation. So there's Ares and Hephaestus, but there's also Eris, who is the goddess of strife. Strife has a synonym, Discord, but Discord has now become a social media, so it's kind of hard to say that she's the goddess of Discord. The idea of Discord, but another word for it is strife, or just suffering, right? She's also the mother of Hebe, who is also the goddess of youth, and Eilithia, the goddess of childbirth, and a lot more, basically. But Hera, despite her reputation as being like this vengeful and jealous person, she was the goddess of women. She was the goddess of family, so oftentimes she would be prayed to in order to like have a safe childbirth, in order to conceive a child, in order to have like a happy home life and all of that good stuff. So yeah, she's usually there's like a lot of her stories are basically her getting mad at whoever is seduced by Zeus, or vice versa, usually with some kind of punishment, right? She even makes like the children, such as Hercules, go insane sometimes. So so like Demeter, Hera is also associated with the role of the Earth Mother in some mythologies, and then her symbols include cows, peacocks, and cuckoos. The story of the cuckoo is also a very unfortunate one. So once again, I know I did a content warning at the very beginning, but I'm gonna say it again because the story, I just want to share like how I learned about it and how my life got turned upside down. Anyway, so the reason why cuckoos are one of her symbols is because like in the mythology, okay, I'm gonna go over how I learned it first, okay? I learned it from a book called D'Aulaire's Greek Myths, and like I said, this is a PG-13 retelling of Greek myths, so they cut out all of the incest stuff, they cut out all of the, you know... no, actually, I don't think they cut out the incest, but they cut out, like, a lot of the crappy, like, assault stuff that happens, basically. So, in the story, in this version of the book, they say that Zeus really fancied Hera, so what he did is he disguised himself as a little cuckoo bird. You can't cut out the incest, yeah. Well, there have been attempts. I think the Hades game does try to say that the daughters are actually the daughters of like another god. So that way there's no incest, but yeah. So in the PG-13 version, Zeus disguises himself as a cuckoo who's been injured by really rough winds, basically. So Hera sees this injured cuckoo and she takes pity on it and she embraces the cuckoo. The cuckoo turns back into Zeus and he embraces her, and that's how they fell in love and that's how they got married. It's so romantic, right? Y'all, when I learned the actual version of the myth, I was freaking I was shocked. I was, once again, content warning for assault, for straight up assault. So, in the actual version of the story, or at least the version that I found out about, Zeus still disguises himself as a cuckoo bird, and Hera still takes pity on it and embraces the cuckoo. And then Zeus returns to his original form, and instead of quote-unquote embracing her, he grabs her and he does the assault. Basically, he assaults her. So when I found that out, I was like, bro, like, but yeah, that's just how it was. That's just how it would be. It's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. But yeah, and for some reason, that is now her symbol. There's also a story on why peacocks are part of her symbol as well. She owned a peacock, and one of Zeus's many consorts, he like I think her name was Io. So Zeus fell in love with a woman named Io and like tried to do the deed with her. And Hera suspected something, but when she looked over to where Zeus was, he was just chilling with a cow. Little did she know, Zeus had transformed Io into a cow. I think it's Io. I think it's her. And Hera was like, "Oh, what you doing with that cow over there? What you got over there?" And Zeus is like, "A cow." So Hera, kind of sensing that Zeus is up to his shenanigans again, she takes the cow and assumes that it's, or I think Zeus says like, "Oh, you know what? This cow is actually a gift for you. It's a gift for you. You could have this cow. It's yours." Zeus is such a dick. So Hera watches over the cow, but she can't watch over it all the time. So she instead has her guard do it, and her guard actually has millions of eyes for some reason. The guard, because it has millions of eyes, even if some sleep, some are still going to be awake. But then I think Mercury or Hermes helps by telling a story that's so boring, it actually puts all 100 of his eyes to sleep, and then he gouges out all 100 of them. I think that's how the story goes. Someone can feel free to correct me. But Hera comes back, sees that the cow has escaped, sees that his guard with 100 eyes is dead. So she takes pity on the guard and places all of his eyes on her peacock. And that's why the peacock has 100 eyes. Yeah. One would think there'd be a prayer to Hera for protection from Zeus and other sexual assault. That's what I'm thinking. That's what I'm thinking, man. But yeah, so the last bullet point I have here is that she is usually part of a triad with her, Zeus, and Athena. Or how they're also known as Tinia, Uni, and Minerva. Or Jupiter, Juno, and Minerva. So also, I find it entertaining that part of the myth is just Hermes telling a story that's so boring that it puts 100 eyes to sleep. Like, really? But yeah, you have to wonder what story Hermes was telling. So the other day I went to go get some bread. So let's go ahead and go from Juno to Junomon. I also really love Junomon's design, like a lot. Okie dokie, so here's Junomon. They cut out, at first glance, it seems like they cut out the whole vengeful aspect of her, and they just made her basically like in love with Jupitermon. Her whole reason for existence is Jupitermon. It's even to the point where her attacks are mainly to augment Jupitermon's power. But she can also fight with those katars that she has, as well as her lances. So she has that going for her. However, she also has, just like how Jupitermon has a wrath mode, she has a hysteric mode. Where she is so overtaken by jealous thoughts that she goes into this new mode and she thinks that all other Digimon are evil. So it actually is very close to the mythology, to the point where like she's like in love with Zeus, but she's so in love that she's basically a yandere, which, my god, if we get a yandere Junomon, I would die happy. Like, I love I love that idea so much. But anyway, in this other form, in hysteric mode, she is like super armored, and then she has 2 lances, she has more chains, and then she can also create a hologram of Jupitermon. But if anyone should lay eyes on it, if anyone should look at this hologram, she would actually vaporize them. It's like this embodiment of jealousy, basically. So it's very, just like how Ceresmon is very thematic to this idea of fertility, I feel like Junomon is also like very much thematic, like very much going with this theme of like toxic or deadly love or dangerous love. So I think that's pretty cool. So let's go ahead and take a look at her design, which, like I said, one of my favorites. Like, she's very much a counterpart to Jupitermon, because she's also very humanoid, but she also has the gold armor, and she has a cape too. If you notice, she has a cape. Let's see, she also has the same halo. I kind of brushed it, I kind of glazed over it, but Jupitermon has a halo. Let's actually go all the way back. Yeah, let's go all the way back to Jupitermon. Oh, actually, you don't see it here, but I think you would see it in the next slide. Here we go. Yeah. So in both his forms, Jupitermon has a halo. it's like 3 halos on top of each other. So if you go back to Junomon, she also has that same halo. No other members of the Olympus 12 have that halo. So it kind of reminds me of like an Evangelion angel, but yeah. So let's see what else. And she has less of her body covered, obviously. She's showing a lot of skin with this one. But in many ways, she kind of is like this counterpart to Jupitermon. She does have a part of her body covered up, and that is her mouth. And then her outfit has the chain and spike motif. So she has a lot of chains, she has a lot of spikes. But the spikes are so thin, it's almost like elegant. It's almost like very, very minimal. She also has a lot of heart motifs, and like I said, I feel like this goes into this whole idea of just dangerous love. And then she has some vague bird motifs on her armor. It's very blink and you'll miss it, but if you look at her knees, she does. I need a way to zoom in, but it's kind of hard to see, but she does have birds on her knees. She also has like her back armor over here vaguely looks like the tail of a peacock when it's like up. So it's like not super overt, but she does have some bird imagery on her. Now if we go into hysteric mode, did I not? Oh yeah, here it is. So interesting to see how most humanoid looking mon so far are paired with the most mechanical looking ones. Yeah, right? That's what I'm thinking too. Which is why when we talk about possible additions, I'm gonna kind of get back to that as well. So now we have Junomon hysteric mode. Like I said, it's a little bit hard to see. Let me see if I can actually zoom in. I'll show you guys. Oh, I can zoom in. Okay, give me a second. Bringing down the projector screen. There we go. We can zoom in. So what I like is that at first glance it seems like this is like her headpiece, and then these are her shoulders, and then these are the lances. But if you zoom in, you can actually see Junomon. You can see her in there. That's her head. That's her head like peeking through, but she has red eyes. She's scary. She's yandere. She's a yandere. I love her. But I don't know, I thought it was also kind of cute that she's just kind of like hiding, even though she's like, what are you doing, Zeus? What are you doing? But yeah, as you can see in hysteric mode, she's a little bit more armored now, so she is a little bit more covered, but you can still see like her body, as opposed to Jupitermon, who like you cannot see an inch of his body, right? Her headpiece does kind of look like Wrath mode Jupitermon as well. So once again, she's still like this counterpart, but she also has more chains. She has bigger lances. And then I forgot who pointed this out. I think I saw it on Twitter. I need a better, hold on. We need a better picture. Junomon. I did not notice this at all until someone on Twitter pointed it out. But if you look at, especially this pose right here, it kind of looks like ovaries. It kind of looks like an ovarian reproductive system. No, but if you think about it, like these are the actual ovaries, this would be the uterus, right? I don't know if it's intentional, but it does have that shape. Then again, Juno and Hera, they are the goddess of motherhood. Of women, so it really could make sense. That's Junomon's hysteric mode. Let's go back to the presentation. Yeah, so she has more of those heart shapes, so it definitely goes into that dangerous love idea. And I do like the little like eyes kind of shining through. Mother. I think she's neat. But alright, so that's Junomon, and we're actually already at our final slide of the day. The final slide of part 1. So now I kind of want to talk about some potential additions. So we don't have these Digimon yet, but these are just my theories. These are just like my little theory craftings of what they could potentially be like. So I feel like at some point, especially with Time Stranger, maybe they might add a Vestamon. Vesta is the Roman name for a goddess named Hestia. So if we go all the way back to the family tree, where is it? Here you go. Stand back, she's about to theory. So if you look back at this family tree, once again, Cronus and Rhea, they have 6 children together. So we've already covered Zeus, we covered Poseidon, we covered Hades, we covered Demeter, and we covered Hera. There's one person missing, and that's Hestia. So Hestia doesn't figure a lot into mythology, only because she was a household goddess. She's someone who was very much worshipped, but she might not have any specific stories because she was someone that was like kind of domestically and personally worshipped. So rather than having any kind of like really cool stories, it's just that she was just kind of like a part of the household, essentially. So she was the goddess of the hearth and the home. So she's usually seen as tending towards to a fire, like the family like hearth, basically. And like I said, she's like a household goddess. So she's who you would pray to for like household duties and keeping the home together, essentially. But there is no Digimon that aligns to Hestia or to Vesta. Vesta is once again the Roman name, not Vesti, Vesta. So if we were to theorycraft about what this Digimon might be like, I would say maybe something fire-based, maybe even cooking-based, because there's already... We're gonna get into this on Friday, but there's actually already a lot of fire-based Digimon, because Marsmon is fire-based, Vulcanusmon is fire-based, I forgot who else. Technically Ceresmon, because she can breathe magma, but there's already a lot of fire-based Digimon, so this would just be another one of those. So maybe her niche might be cooking based. I also imagine that because she's a household goddess, maybe her Digimon would also be the mistress of some kind of hub world, like some kind of like you saw this in Cyber Sleuth since we're playing Cyber Sleuth as well. There is kind of like a hub world. It's like the you know, when you like jack into the system. So maybe we have a Digimon that is like basically the one managing over it. Basically she'd be like Mire from Cyber Sleuth, right? So that's one theory. You guys are also welcome to come up with your own theories as well as to what a possible Vestamon might be like. And then the one that I'm like super like excited to kind of theorycraft about, so Prosperimon. I feel like eventually we might get a Prosperimon. So this would be named after Prosperina, who is the Roman name for Persephone. So we talked about her a lot during the stream. She's the daughter of Demeter, who is the goddess of fertility. But she's also wife to Pluto, to Hades. And she's queen of the underworld. So she has a lot of like potential with how her design could be. Because what I'm thinking is, because Junomon or Junomon is the feminine counterpart to Jupitermon, I feel like Prosperimon would be the feminine counterpart to Plutomon. So, you know, maybe very similar. Maybe she's also showing some skin. Maybe she's partially armored. But I can also, because she would be the daughter to Ceresmon, I can also imagine her having some kind of organic motifs. Maybe some kind of like flowers associated with death. Or maybe even something with pomegranates, because pomegranates are kind of the whole thing with like her either being forced to or choosing to remain in the underworld. And she might even have different forms, kind of like Ceresmon, because Ceresmon has the big FU bird form, and then she has the medium form where it's just like her body, right? So I think it'd be cool if like maybe, I don't know, I'm just spitballing here, but like imagine there's like a Cerberus type, and on top of the Cerberus is like Prosperimon, right? And maybe she has some like flower motifs. But like I said, I can imagine her more so being like a feminine counterpart to Plutomon. So I think that'd be really cool. Wizardmon, because V-tapped virgins. Skulls and thorny vine motifs would be sick. Yeah, I think so too. Like, it's also, there's a lot of discourse about Persephone, because there's a lot of retellings of her story. There's this manhwa or like webtoon called Lore Olympus that reimagines her as like more of like a death figure. Yeah, Lore Olympus is kind of a big one. But there's also this really interesting video by Overly Sarcastic Productions that goes into Persephone's epithets, because back in Mycenaean days, she might have also been an underworld goddess. I'll just link it to you guys. It's a really interesting one because it talks about how, like, the past of Persephone is that she actually might have started out as like an underworld goddess. But yeah, I think it would be cool to have this interesting mix of like organic nature stuff with like underworld stuff. So yeah, I don't have any designs. Like I'm not great at designing like anthropomorphic or humanoid Digimon at all, but I just think it'd be a cool idea. I just think it'd be neat. But yeah, so that is actually it. That's actually it for this first part. So if you guys want a preview of next time, so we're actually going to be doing part 2 on Friday at 7 p.m. PST, so the same time this stream started, and we're going to be going over these folks. So we're actually going to be going over the children of Jupiter, aka Zeus's kids. So this is going to include Ares, Hephaestus, Athena, Hermes, Dionysus, Apollo, Artemis, and Aphrodite. Sometimes Aphrodite is considered a child of Jupiter. Sometimes she's born from testicles, but yeah. What if Prosperimon had red bubble braids to resemble pomegranate seeds? Yo, that'd be so cool. That'd be so cool. I would love to see like a fan design of Prosperimon. I think it'd be neat. And maybe if I get to practicing how to draw people, maybe I'll do it myself, but otherwise, I just think it'd be cool. But cool. I hope you guys enjoyed this though. I hope that this was educational. I do feel my voice going out already, but I hope you guys enjoyed this kind of deep dive into the Olympus 12, as well as Greek and Roman gods, and kind of the mixture of the two.